From a business standpoint, is there enough demand across all American kilt makers to justify operation of an American woolen mill?
It's like
American
a Tartan Woolen mill.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's Loch Heron, House of Edgar, Martin Mills, Strathmore. There's a few and some smaller mills over in the UK, Scotland, England, Welsh Tartan Center. There's not that many mills in the US. Mills selling tartan, goose egg,
0.
none. Is there enough demand for an American tartan mill? When I've spoken to suppliers and tartan mills over in the UK, hey, where are your biggest customers? What percentage of your customers are, UK based versus Australia versus US versus Canada versus Germany, wherever you are? UK, by and large, their largest customer base for the tartan mills in the UK is the UK. The US is the second biggest market by a pretty long shot. Canada, I think they were estimated I'm going off of memory from what the mills have told me. Canada is roughly 20% of the U.S. Of the size of the U.S. market. Australia, again, about 15 to 20%. Germany has some in there, and European, other European countries. But the U.S. is the biggest outside of the U.K. Is there enough business here to sustain it? Ish, but no. So here's what happened. 10 years ago, I started. I had that exact same question. I said, okay, what if we did some weaving here in the U.S.? What if we had some of our custom weaves done here at stateside? So I had to find some different tartan mill or some different mills that worked with wool yarn, so they could do wool fabric. I found one mill. Mac told me about a mill, Colonial Weavers, or I forget the name, Heritage
right.
Weavers or something like that. And I contacted them. They sent me some samples of cloth. I have a piece of Black Watch. I have a piece of Scottish National. It was nice cloth, a little in the grease, not fully finished, but nice cloth, well done, well woven, 16-ounce cloth. And I was speaking to the guy and said, hey, this is nice. Can we get it finished? What would the process be? And we went back and forth on the phone. And basically the issue that we have is, and this is where I go traveling back in time with you, back, and not meaning to sound political. So let's travel back in time to 1991, 1992, on-air TV live debates with Bush, Clinton, and Ross Perot. And when they were talking about NAFTA, talking about free trade, talking about opening things up, and Ross Perot specifically saying, what you will hear is a large sucking sound if you do this. And that will be the sound of jobs leaving the country. And essentially, that is what happened with the clothing trade, with the textile trade. A lot of it left for overseas manufacture. It just became too expensive way too quickly. And all of those, not all, the vast majority of those jobs, the vast majority of those companies were lost. And it's not just weaving. It is spinning. It is companies that do the dyeing. It's the companies that do the warping to get the mills to do. It's the companies that do the actual weaving on the looms. It's the companies that do the finishing process. It's all of these different things. They had an industry here in the States that was very, they had some pockets, some areas where there was more of these particular types of things, but this company helped prop up that company, helped prop up this company, and they all worked together. The problem was, as things started to slow down at the mill, they were ordering, less yarn from this yarn supplier, who was then getting less yarn dyed from this local dye house. And all these things very much had a domino effect. And it hollowed out the industry in the U.S. for these trades.
Oh, hold up there for a second. I would love for us to keep answering this question, but first, we need to remind the folks about our website.
That's true. we do have a website. If you want to look as dapper as these two, or better, frankly, probably be better, check out usakilts.com for all of your Highland wear needs. Back to the present, or back to 15 years ago, 10 years ago, when I spoke to the gent from that particular mill, what we discovered was, okay, if I wanted to have particular tartans woven to my spec, meaning, 16 ounce, here's the colors, let's go. He would have to have it dyed in one state and then sent to him to specific yarn shades, and just doing enough just for me, for the record. And then he would want to weave a huge amount of cloth, not just calling up a couple yards here and there, but weaving 60, 120, 200, 300. Really, he wanted huge orders, like 500-600 yards of cloth. And then he would have to take that cloth from the Carolinas, I think he was in North Carolina, and send it to New Jersey on a UPS truck, additional cost, to be finished in New Jersey, have it then sent back to him to be inspected, and then have it sent to me. All of these different stops, all of these different things add time, add money, add cost to this entire process. When all was said and done, he said, yeah, I can do it. It's going to be, X number of dollars per yard. Here's your minimums. Here's what we have to do. It was cheaper by a long shot and much lower minimums to just keep ordering from the places in the UK that already do this stuff for a living. And I didn't have to reinvent the wheel over here. So ultimately I said, thank you. And, we shook hands and, kind of left it at that. And he's doing his business. Frankly, most of his cloth he leaves in the grease. He does historical things that don't need the finishing process because he doesn't want to have to do it and add that additional cost and time and labor. So yes, we've looked at it. It is not really feasible. And the parallel is, in the UK, they didn't have that same giant sucking sound as Ross Perot said. They still have those industries over in England, in Scotland, that exist because they never let it go. They kept doing it the whole time, and they've propped up their own industry. There's two mills that one of the dye houses was going to go out of business. And two of the competing entity mills went in together and bought the dye house to make sure that it exists because they get their yarn dyed at this particular place. That is how seminal all of the different components are to the process. I don't think people realize how tenuous, how small tenuous these connections are, and how small this industry actually is. We have Keith from Loch Heron and Nick from House of Edgar coming out after a trade show in a few weeks, and I'm going to interview them and kind of competing mills, and I'm going to talk to them and kind of have a roundtable discussion about the industry in general and how things are, where they're going, where they are, all that kind of stuff. It's neat to know the inner workings of this thing, but it is a lot more fragile than a lot of people realize. It's kind of we're only, one generation away from losing democracy. We're only one generation away from losing kilt making and tartan weaving in production in the UK. Wow. It's kind of that tenuous. It's not like it's dire and everything's going to go tits up, a week from now, but we have to keep supporting the mills that are supporting the culture and that are doing the things, because like the Walmartification of America, the argument, and this isn't me bashing on Walmart, the people that argue against Walmart and what they do is they go into a community and they offer lower prices and they do all these things, and then all of the mom and pop shops in the surrounding community go out of business because they can't compete. And once they're out, everyone's reliant on Walmart, but no one's making any money unless you work at Walmart, because that's the only place you can work. And then once no one's making any money and no one's spending any money, then Walmart goes, this store isn't profitable anymore. And then they leave, and it just hollows out the community. The same kind of thing can happen here, and the way to guard against it is supporting these artisans, supporting these companies that prop up the entire industry. So, sorry, I will get off my soapbox. I went off on a crazy tangent there. But, yes, so the short answer is no, it can't really be done in the U.S. There was one mill way back when we first started in Canada called Fraser and Kirkbride that used to weave tartan in British Columbia. And they basically, it was a very small operation with only a couple looms, and they closed up, I want to say 15 years ago now, and ended up selling their looms to Ingalls Buchan over in Scotland. And they are kind of like wholesalers for him or something like that. So it's a very small industry with not a lot of working parts.
There you go.
Yes. So buy quality stuff and support quality artisans or something. Mm-hmm. So this isn't meant to be a downer. I shouldn't end it on a downer. Let's say something nice. But it's great and robust, and we're all going to have a good time.
We can't support American tartan mills because there aren't any, but we can support UK tartan mills who are legit and are keeping things alive.
Yep. And we're supporting the companies that are supporting the culture, and we are, we are a link in that chain. If we, not we as in USA Kilts, we as in you out there and us over here, we are a link in that chain, unbroken chain from the 1700s all the way through, and it's going to live beyond us, but it's not going to die on our watch, and that's the point.
Brr.
Yeah, that's how you do it.